This is our second piece with Joel Brown, who wrote that. Hold it up. The Essex Coastal Byway Guide. We're not going to speak so much about. We're going to indirectly speak about the Essex Coastal Byway Guide in this piece. We're going to talk about Kickstarter. Kickstarter is crowdsourcing, and it right? Would you
crowdfunding?
Crowdfunding.
Yep.
Crowdfunding, and it's a way for musicians, for writers, for people that have any kind of idea, but don't have necessarily the funding to make that idea a reality. People to kind of invest in that idea. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of like a more democratic version of the old arts patronage of back in Bach and Beethoven's day, of where the Duke would get the change out of his couch and say, "Go ahead and write me a symphony." Except this time, it's all the regular folks. You can use. You start with your social media network, your friends and family, and say, I want to do this project, but there's not a publishing company or there's not a record company or whatever that wants to fund me. Would you like to go in for a little bit? And not only will I give you a free copy of the Essex Coastal Byway Guide, I'll sign it for you, or I'll put your name on the acknowledgments page or whatever, and people invest different amounts of money in that project. And it's, to be perfectly honest, it was a very almost emotional thing for me to see how many people were willing to put their money in support of my project.
No, they had to they believe in you and believe that you're going to do a good job. I mean, well, maybe some people just like you as a person, but they know you're going to produce something worthwhile.
And I actually had a few people. Kickstarter is, and there are some other sites like it, but Kickstarter has become such a a well-known trend. I saw these unfamiliar names, a few of them pop up as donors, and so I went and looked at their Kickstarter profiles, and these were people in a couple different places in the country who look each day at Kickstarter's new projects and just give $20 to 2 or 3 of them, and they had donated to 70 or 80 or 100 projects, and that was kind of their hobby, their way of giving back. I have a friend who can we swear?
We can swear. This is a good one in Gloucester.
I have a friend who's my tax guy, basically, and he says, that's how you support the arts. You buy shit. And that's true now. I mean, we really... I found this because I was writing about a couple of different bands at different times for the Globe, freelance stories. And these were bands who had made, I thought, great records, but record companies don't fund unknown bands anymore. They don't give you that touring budget. They don't give you that recording budget.
We're sick of seeing the Rolling Stones at 80 years old.
Right.
You know what I mean? They get the money. You know what I mean? It's like these young kids.
They take all the money. The
Right.
Stones and Lady Gaga take all the money, and the up-and-coming bands, which record companies used to take the money they made from the Stones and invest some of it in young bands, and they just don't do that anymore. And so these bands were going to Kickstarter, and they were or one of the other sites like it, and having some success. And I think the biggest story of that this past year, Amanda Palmer, who actually did have a record contract at one time, she was in the Dresden Dolls out of Boston, and she tried to raise $100,000 to make her new album, and she ended up raising $1 million. Her fans sent in that much money.
Wow.
So if you have something that you can really get behind, if you have something people want, they're willing to invest these days. And I think it's part of the whole sort of decentralization, if that's not too fancy a word, for what's happening to the media and the arts, of which of which Good Morning Gloucester is another example. People are finding all sorts of different independent ways to get their message or their art out there.
Kick the man in the nuts.
I didn't say that because I also still work for the mainstream media sometimes. So,
Joking.
But yeah.
But so let's talk about the process, like the Kickstarter process. They don't allow you to just say, "Hey, I'm Joe Schmo, and throw me some money."
They have a very serious list of rules and what type of projects are acceptable. You can't go on there and ask people to Kickstarter fund your mortgage. It has to be like an art project or something like that you want to do. And they have a whole kind of complex set of rules hoops you have to jump through. And they very much encourage you to make a video to kick it off. They set it up so you can send email updates to your followers. They collect the money and forward it on to you. I mean, there's a whole system that you have to... I studied up a little bit. My wife and I did a lot of research on Kickstarter before I actually started mine, but it worked very well.
Yeah. Well, it's really nice to know that, people, passionate people, whatever their art is, that they don't have to, beg and grovel to the man.
Right.
And there's some fantastic people, artists out there that if you have the dream, you have the idea,
Right.
that you can push forward with
Right.
it.
I think, my only concern is that someday down the road we're going to have mined that vein pretty thoroughly. There are thousands of projects on Kickstarter now, and then there's also Indiegogo and 2 or 3 other sites. And I think there's a limit. I think there's a finite amount of money that can be raised out there this way, and we'll see when we hit that. But
Yeah. Well, but then the cream will rise.
I think so.
You know what I mean? And that's why kind of social media is important. Like, you know what I mean? To get your awareness of what you're doing. There's these tools. There's Twitter. There's Facebook. There's blogging.
Absolutely.
That don't necessarily have to cost you anything.
There's somebody had a saying. I forget which one of those bands it was connected to, but there was some pundit somewhere who had a pretty good saying for the music business, which is the theory of 100 true fans. No, 1,000 true fans. If you have 1,000 true fans who are willing to spend $100 a year buying your CD, your T-shirt, and your concert ticket, then you're making a living. And you can find those 1,000 true fans, even if they're spread all over the country. You can find them by social media.
There you go. Go buy the Essex Coastal Byway.
700 to go.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, go get your Essex Coastal Byway Guide, your local bookstores. Joel Brown, look for your ramblings and your writings in the Boston Globe. What is it, the Globe North mostly nowadays?
Globe North and the Globe Arts section.
Globe Arts section. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me, Joe.